Hello and welcome to Owning the Narrative. I am Bulow. The show will feature the top news of the week, complete with my observations, and even a little bit of sarcasm thrown in. The top news stories will be taken from my morning news briefings that I write on the Rick Bulow New Media blog every weekday morning. If you go on to like what you see, smash that thumbs up button. And now, let's go right into the news. We are 20 days after the election, and there is still some recounts and lawsuits being handed down. And we do have something that could have avoided all this. Found this from the Daily Signal. It is 2005 Carter Baker report could have averted problems with 2020 voting. They call on states to increase voter ID requirements, to be leery of mail voting, to halt ballot harvesting, to maintain voter lists, in part to ensure that people are promptly removed from them, to allow election observers to monitor ballot counting, and to make sure voting machines are working properly. They also wanted the media to refrain from calling elections too early and from counting election polls. All of this may sound eerily similar to the issues in the prolonged presidential election battle of 2020, but these were among the 87 recommendations from the 2005 report of the Bipartisan Commission on Federal Election Reform, known informally as the Carter-Baker Commission. The Bipartisan Commission's co-chairmen were former Democrat President Jimmy Carter and former Secretary of State James Baker, a Republican who served in the George H.W. Bush administration. The commission was created to address voting and election integrity issues raised by the tumultuous 36-day post-election battle of 2020, which was settled by the U.S. Supreme Court decision that resulted in awarding Florida's 25 electoral votes and the presidency to Republican George W. Bush over Democrat Al Gore. Now, had Congress and the state governments adopted many of the panel's recommendations, the 2020 post-election mess between President Donald Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden might have been avoided, said Carter-Baker Commission member K.C. James, now the president of the Heritage Foundation. So many of the problems we're now hearing about in the aftermath of the 2020 election could have been avoided had states heeded the advice of the Commission on Federal Election Reform, she said. James continued, simple protections against fraud like voter ID and updated voter registration lists make perfect sense if we truly believe that every vote must count. Election officials should take another look at the Commission's recommendations and make sure they're doing everything possible to protect the integrity of our elections. Several state legislatures adopted aspects of the recommendations, particularly voter ID proposals. However, Congress was reportedly was enthusiastic about the report. Major media outlets have called the race for Biden, but election litigation is still playing out of court, and votes are still being counted. However, 70% of Republicans do not believe the 2020 election was free and fair. According to a Political Morning Consult poll, before the election, just 35% of Republicans didn't believe the election would be free and fair. The shift was different among Democrats, where 95% believed the election was free and fair afterward, compared with 52% who said the same before the election. Here's a look at the 2005 panel's recommendations relevant to this year's elections. Number 1, voter ID. With the vast expansion of mail-in voting this year, voter ID requirements were less likely. Today, states have a patchwork of voter ID laws, with 36 states either requiring or requesting voters to present identification at the polls, according to the National Conference of State Legislatures. The conference says only 6 states have quote-unquote strict photo ID requirements: Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Mississippi, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. The Carter-Baker Commission called for voter ID standards nationwide in its 2005 report to ensure that persons presenting themselves at the polling place are the ones on the registration list. The commission recommends that the states require voters to use a real ID card, which was mandated in a law signed by the president in May 2005. the Carter-Baker Commission report said. The card includes a person's full legal name, date of birth, a signature captured as a digital image, a photograph, and a person's social security number. This card should be modestly adapted for voting purposes to indicate on the front or back whether the individual is a U.S. citizen. States should provide an Election Assistance Commission template ID with their photo to non-drivers free of charge. Carter, when speaking months after the release of the report, said other countries not known for being examples of democracy have fairer elections than the United States, and stressed the need for photo IDs. It's disgraceful and embarrassing, the former president said in May 2006. On IDs, Carter said, Americans have to remember you have to have the equivalent to what we're requiring to cast a ballot, to cash a check, or board a plane. Number 2, mail-in and absentee voting risks. In a brief supporting the Trump campaign's Pennsylvania litigation over mail-in ballots, a group of Republican state attorneys general referenced the Carter-Baker Commission report, among other items, regarding mail-in voting and ballot harvesting. The 2020 election trends seem to shift dramatically as mail-in votes are counted. Further, many questions have emerged about the point of origin for ballots. Specifically, the report called on states to prohibit third parties or political operatives from collecting ballots, a practice commonly known as ballot harvesting. The report stated, absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud. State and local jurisdictions should prohibit a person from handling absentee ballots other than the voter, an acknowledged family member, the U.S. Postal Service, or other legitimate shipper, or election officials, the 2005 Commission report said. The practice in some states of allowing candidates or party workers to pick up and deliver absentee ballots should be eliminated. However, this year, as mail-in ballot or as mail-in voting veered into becoming a partisan issue, the Carter Center issued a statement promoting support for mail-in voting, but maintaining safeguards against ballot harvesting. The Carter Center, funded by the former president and First Lady Rosalind Carter, is affiliated with Emory University and promotes peace and democracy efforts globally and domestically. A Carter Center press release in May said the Commission report noted among its many findings and recommendations that because it takes place outside the regulated environment of local polling locations, voting by mail creates increased logistical challenges and the potential for vote fraud, especially if safeguards are lacking or when candidates or political party activists are allowed to handle mail-in or absentee ballots. However, the Carter-Baker Commission found that where safeguards for ballot integrity are in place, for example in Oregon, where the entire state has voted by mail since 1998, there was little evidence of voter fraud, the Carter Center statement continued. The Commission's main recommendations on vote by mail and absentee ballot voting were to increase research on vote by mail and early voting, and to eliminate the practice of allowing candidates or party workers to pick up and deliver absentee ballots. Fortunately, since 2005, many states have gained substantial experience in vote by mail and have shown how key concerns can be effectively addressed through appropriate planning, resources, training, and messaging. Carter himself is quoted in the press release saying, I urge political leaders across the country to take immediate steps to expand vote by mail and other measures that can help protect the core of American democracy, the right of our citizens to vote. Number 3, avoiding duplicate registration across state lines. In Nevada, the Trump campaign asserts there were potentially thousands of out-of-state votes cast in one of the most closely contested states. The Carter-Baker Commission report called for states to make it easier to track registered voters who move from one state to another to avoid duplication of registrations. The report states invalid voter files, which contain ineligible, duplicate, fictional, or deceased voters, are an invitation to fraud. In order to assure that lists take account of citizens moving from one state to another, voter databases should be made interoperable between states. The Carter-Baker report stated, this would serve to eliminate duplicate registrations, which are a source of potential fraud. The report calls for states to maintain and update their voter registration lists. When an eligible voter moves from one state to another, the state to which the voter is moving should be required to notify the state which the voter is leaving to eliminate that voter from its registration list, the report said, adding, all states should have procedures for maintaining accurate lists, such as the electronic matching of death records, driver's licenses, local tax rolls, and felon records. Federal and state courts should provide state election offices with a list of individuals who declare they are non-citizens when they are summoned for jury duty. Number 4, election observers for integrity. In Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Nevada, Republicans have complained that qualified election observers have been prohibited from watching the counting. The Carter-Baker Commission report stressed the need for election observers to maintain the integrity of the ballots. All legitimate domestic and international election observers should be granted unrestricted access to the election process, provided that they accept the election rules, do not interfere with the electoral process, and respect the secrecy of the ballot, the 2005 report said. Such observers should apply for accreditation, which should allow them to visit any polling station in any state and to view all parts of the election process, including the testing of voting equipment, the processing of absentee ballots, and the vote count. States that limit election observation only to representatives of candidates and political parties should amend their election laws to explicitly permit accreditation of independent and international election observers. Number 5, reliable voting machines. Voting machines have been a significant issue in 2020, particularly in Michigan, as one country there flipped from Biden to Trump after a hand recount showed the machine count to be inaccurate. The Carter-Baker Commission suggested that machines print out paper receipts for voters to verify their vote was accurately counted. States should adopt unambiguous procedures to reconcile any disparity between the electronic ballot tally and the paper ballot tally, the 2005 report says. The Commission strongly recommends that states determine well in advance of elections which will be the ballot of record. Number 6, and this is probably the biggest one, media calling elections. On election night, Fox News Channel was the first to call the state of Arizona for Biden, prompting outrage in the Trump camp. Moreover, major media outlets have projected Trump to have won the election, even as vote counting and litigation continue. The 2005 Commission report also addressed problems with the media, suggesting news outlets voluntarily offer candidates free airtime and also show restraint in calling a state from one candidate or the other. The First Amendment would prevent any such rule from being mandatory. News organizations should voluntarily refrain from projecting any presidential election results in any state until all of the polls have closed in the 40 contiguous states. The report states, news organizations should voluntarily agree to delay the release of any exit poll data until the election has been decided. Number 7, voter fraud, prosecuting voter fraud. The Carter-Baker Commission suggested that federal and state prosecutors should more aggressively monitor voter fraud. In July of even-numbered years, the U.S. Department of Justice should issue a public report on its investigations of election fraud, the report says. This report should specify the numbers of allegations made, matters investigated, crimes prosecuted, and individuals convicted for various crimes. Each state's attorney general and each local prosecutor should also issue a similar report. The U.S. Department of Justice's Office of Public Integrity should increase its staff to investigate and prosecute election-related fraud. Now, I said number 6, media calling elections, is a big one because, okay, of all of the media outlets that I have in my news briefing, which you'll find, and I'll drop a link to my news briefing below, there is one outlet called the Epoch Times that does not, or has not, called the election for anyone. And we can see that probably right on their front page. I'm pulling up the site as we speak. Live radio or not live, but yeah, I mean, you know, we have, yeah, right on their front page. The Epoch Times right here says the election outcome unclear amid pending recounts and legal challenges. Click on the state for details, and they have 6 states: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona. And as you can see right here, let me just pull this up for you. Let me pull this up for you just a skosh. Right here it says Trump 232, Biden 227, with most of the states going for, and a couple of districts going for Trump, with just a small handful for Biden. And keep in mind, this is last updated today at 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So yeah, I mean, you know, that's the big key right there, folks, is many major media outlets have already called it. You know, in other words, they say that it's baked in the cake. But there are a couple of smaller ones that have not, and I basically the jury's still out. Anyway, I'll drop the link to the Epoch Times front page in the description below, and also what I'll do is I'll drop the 2005 Carter Baker Commission report in the description as well, so you can take a look at it. I just glanced at it, and it's 133 pages long, so it's a little long there. Now, while all this recount and litigations are going on, there seems to be a little bit of, well, first we have Alan Dershowitz, a Harvard law professor, saying that President Donald Trump still has several legal paths to a 2020 election victory. This coming from our good friends at the aforementioned Epoch Times. Alan Dershowitz, a Harvard law professor emeritus, said he thinks President Donald Trump has several legal paths to a 2020 election victory. Dershowitz said there are a few quote-unquote constitutional paths to victory for the president's legal team, although he noted that Trump will face legal hurdles in all of them. For example, in Pennsylvania, they have 2 very strong legal arguments. One, that the courts changed what the legislature did about counting ballots after the end of Election Day. That's a winning issue in the Supreme Court. I don't necessarily support it, but it's a winning issue in the Supreme Court. Dershowitz told Fox Business on November 22nd. The team, meanwhile, has a winning issue in the Supreme Court on equal protection, that some counties allowed flawed ballots to be cured while others didn't. Bush v. Gore suggests that an equal protection argument can prevail. Now, Dershowitz, who helped defend Trump during the Senate impeachment trial earlier this year, said that because of Democratic candidate Joe Biden's lead over the president, Trump's team may not be able to contest enough ballots in Pennsylvania. The other legal theory they have, which is a potentially strong one, is that the computers, either fraudulently or by glitches, change hundreds of thousands of votes. There are enough votes to make a difference, but I haven't seen the evidence to support that, he said. So in one case, they don't have the numbers. In another case, they don't seem yet to have the evidence. Maybe they do. I haven't seen it. But the legal theory is there to support them if they have the numbers and they have the evidence. However, time is running out for Trump's legal team, he said. You need to have witnesses, experts subject to cross-examination, and findings by a court, he said, adding that there is no legal route to undoing that. After the election is certified, the strongest case, if they have the evidence, is that computers may have turned hundreds of thousands of votes. Last week, Dershowitz noted that if Trump can keep the Biden electoral count before we're below 270, then the matter goes to the House of Representatives, where, of course, there is a Republican majority among the delegations of states, and you vote by a state if it goes to the House. You need a perfect storm for it to work, he said. You need to get enough states, enough state attorneys general, or state departments, or whoever, secretaries of state or governors that are Republican that legitimately refuse to certify the results because they're under challenge on the day the Electoral College meets by statute. Representative Mo Brooks, Republican Alabama, a former prosecutor, told the Epoch Times last week that Congress has the ultimate say over whether to accept or reject the Electoral College votes. Congress has the absolute right to reject the submitted Electoral College votes of any state, which we believe has such a shoddy election system that you can't trust the election results that those states are submitting to us, that they're suspect, Brooks said. And I'm not going to put my name in support of any state that employs an election system that I don't have confidence in. Brooks noted that on January 6th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, the 50 states will report to Congress. The President of the Senate will preside over this meeting and will report to Congress whether what they contend are their electoral college results in their state. The President of the Senate, under the U.S. Constitution, is Vice President Mike Pence. So there you go. There are a few legal challenges that are still happening, and I will be bringing them to you as I find them in my briefings and post them here. But while all this in the front is going on, there are some battles behind closed doors. Got this from justthenews.com, where it says Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, not part of any Trump legal team. Rudy Giuliani, the lead attorney for President Trump's election challenges, and Trump campaign senior legal advisor Jenna Ellis, said Sunday that high-profile attorney Sidney Powell does not work for the president personally or for his campaign. Sidney Powell is practicing law on her own, the statement from Giuliani and Ellis said. She is not a member of the Trump legal team. She is also not a lawyer for the president in its personal capacity. Powell on Thursday spoke during a press conference where Giuliani and Ellis also spoke. I look forward to Mayor Giuliani spearheading the legal effort to defend our right to free and fair elections, President Trump tweeted on November 14. Rudy Giuliani, Joseph DeGeneva, Victoria Tunsing, Sidney Powell, and Jenna Ellis, a truly great team, added to our other wonderful lawyers and representatives. Powell, who has alleged that massive corruption occurred during the 2020 election, said during an interview on Newsmax that a quote-unquote biblical filing is forthcoming regarding the state of Georgia. Georgia is extremely bad, Powell said. We got ballots being shredded, ballots being thrown out in trash bags, the votes being switched, the algorithms being run, you name the manner of fraud, and it occurred in Georgia, she said. Now, while media outlets have projected Joe Biden to be the winner of the 2020 presidential contest, President Trump has not conceded and has made allegations of election fraud. The Peach State is probably going to be the first that I'm going to blow up, Powell said, remarking that Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State need to go with it because they're in on the Dominion scam with their last-minute purchase or award of a contract to Dominion of $100 million. The State Bureau of Investigation for Georgia ought to be looking into the financial benefits received by Mr. Kemp and the Secretary of State's family about that time. During the interview, Mark Halpern sought to clarify if Powell was alleging that the Georgia governor is directly involved because of financial benefits in the conspiracy to defeat the president in Georgia. We have certainly been told that there is evidence of that and would warrant an investigation. if anybody were actually going to do an honest investigation, Powell said. And I mean, I personally have not heard of Sidney Powell up until a couple months ago when she was on the team for Michael Flynn. But yeah, I mean, you know, it'll be interesting. It'll be very interesting to see what what Ms. Powell drums up, and if Rudy Giuliani, Jen Ellis, and other Trump campaign attorneys come up with, and in a little bit of a twist to it, Mike Flynn Jr. says to give this the 24-hour rule. This coming from BizPac Review. The Trump campaign's challenge of the outcome of the 2020 election took an odd turn Sunday night when it was announced that former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell was not a member of President Trump's legal team. But there may be more to this story that centers around fundraising, as Powell vows to stay the course with a little flair, employing the hashtag cracking on steroids. Trump campaign senior legal advisor Jen Ellis posted a statement on Twitter on behalf of the president's legal team, tweeting out, Sidney Powell is practicing law on her own. She is not a member of the Trump legal team. She's also not a lawyer for the president in his personal capacity, the release said. Powell, who has claimed skewed algorithms allowed electronic voting machines to switch millions of ballots from President Trump to Democrat nominee Joe Biden, appeared at a press conference last week with the Trump legal team. Trump included her name in a tweet posted November 14 as a part of a truly great team, quote unquote. CBS This Morning producer Kristen Brown tweeted a statement from Powell Sunday evening saying she, quote unquote, understands Sunday's statement and will continue to represent those who have had their votes stolen by massive frauds through Dominion and Smartmatic. The chips will fall where they may, and we will defend the foundations of this great republic, cracking on steroids, she added. And you can see the tweet right there from Kristen Brown. Former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who was represented by Powell, said in a tweet late Sunday that she was suspended from Twitter for 12 hours, adding that she understands the statement released by the president's legal team and, quote unquote, agrees with it. He also said Powell was, quote unquote, staying the course to prove election fraud. Ellis responded to that tweet to include a statement she said Powell gave to the Wall Street Journal that was similar to what CBS had reported. Jen Ellis tweeted out, Sidney Powell to Wall Street Journal, I agree with the statement today. I will represent hashtag We the People and seek the truth. I intend to expose all the fraud and let the chips fall where they may. We will not allow the foundations of this great republic to be destroyed by abject fraud. Flynn's son, Mike Flynn Jr., insisted on Parler that Trump hasn't, quote unquote, dropped Powell, noting that Ellis helped share her statement and suggested the motivation behind the move may be related to funding. Cannot confirm yet, but I'm confident this has to do with money coming in for legal defense fund support, he wrote. Sidney Powell has her own separate entity for legal donations that isn't in conjunction with the Trump legal team. Frees Sidney Powell to do her own thing, which will still be biblical. Mike Flynn Jr. added before saying, give the story the 24-hour rule. Now, it's kind of interesting that that's being said. I mean, okay, in circles, in a couple of circles that I'm involved, or in one major circle that I'm involved in, they say to give it 48 hours. And look, whether it's 24 hours or 48 hours, whatever comes of it is going to be very intriguing and interesting. And as always, I will be here bringing information to you live. So drop a comment, or drop a comment below on what you think this will all turn out to be, and yeah, I'll see you in the next video. 3 weeks past the election, some conservatives say it's not over yet, but the GSA is going forward with the transition. Got this article from the dailysignal.com, my favorite place to go to in search of articles. We have presidential election isn't over yet, conservative leaders say. Until quote unquote every legal vote is counted, the presidential election isn't over. Prominent conservative leaders said in a joint statement Monday. Members of the Conservative Action Project, a coalition of American political, economic, and social activists, say they are standing with those refusing to allow the election to conclude until every legal vote has been counted. Former Attorney General Edwin Meese III, the founding chairman of the Conservative Action Project, and more than 100 other leaders in the conservative movement, signed Monday's statement, which reads in part, ours is a government of laws. Included in those laws are the processes by which elections at every level of government are conducted. The purpose of subjecting the election process to a legal regime is to ensure the results are and are accepted as just and accurate. The system works and all Americans should trust it, but it must be allowed to fully work. It is not a coup to insist that we follow our election laws. It does not erode the foundations of the republic to remind American citizens that the media does not certify elections, and it is not a stain on our national honor for a candidate to refuse to concede when there were open and compelling disputes about an electoral outcome. On and after November 7, a number of news outlets, including the Associated Press, declared former Vice President Joe Biden the winner of the 2020 presidential campaign, despite several unfinished legal inquiries into the fairness of the election in the highly contested states across the country. In Pennsylvania, for example, Representative Mike Kelly, Republican Pennsylvania, and other GOP leaders are still pursuing a legal battle in which they question the constitutionality of the state's mail-in voting practices and last-minute election rules changes. The mainstream media may think they get to decide the winners of our election, but the people in our country decide. Once every legal vote is counted, Mary Vaught, executive director of the Senate Conservatives Fund, told the Daily Signal in an email Monday, given that there are still ongoing investigations into the 2020 election, our presidential election has not concluded, the Conservative Action Project leaders asserted. The absolute integrity of each citizen's legally cast vote for president is at stake in this presidential election. Becky Norton Dunlop, a former White House advisor to President Ronald Reagan, told the Daily Signal in an email Monday. Dunlop, one of the signers of the statement, noted that in 2000 it took more than a month for Americans to know for certain whether then Texas Governor George W. Bush or then Vice President Al Gore had been decided. That was just as difficult a time for a nation as it is today, Dunlop said. But the fact remains, said Dunlop, that only legal votes and every legal vote should be counted to ensure the integrity of America's election process. And that's a very valid point. I mean, once every legal vote is counted and there is still a little bit of controversy as to what is and is not legal, which is why they have these court hearings. They're just work it out. And I got this article from my good friends over at the Epoch Times that says Trump vows to win re-election after GSA makes transition resources available to Biden. President Donald Trump said on Monday that he will win the 2020 presidential election after the General Services Administration, or GSA, indicated that it has made transition resources available for Democrat presidential candidate Joe Biden. Our case strongly continues. We will keep up the good fight, and I believe we will prevail, he wrote in a Twitter post. Trump's announcement follows a letter that GSA Administrator Emily Murphy sent to Biden, and there's a link to the PDF in the article, where she notified the former vice president that some transition resources, including $6.3 million for the Biden transition team to carry out the provisions of Section 3 of the Presidential Transition Act, and another $1 million for the Biden team to provide appointee orientation sessions and a transition directory are now made available for him and his team. To qualify for the appropriations, the Biden team must meet the reporting requirements outlined in Section 6 of the Presidential Transition Act. In her letter, Murphy explicitly stated that the presidency has not been decided. GSA does not dictate the outcome of legal disputes and recounts, nor does it determine whether such proceedings are reasonable or justified, she wrote. The actual winner of the presidential election will be determined by the electoral process detailed in the Constitution. The current situation is unaddressed by the Presidential Transition Act, and Congress should amend the act, she strongly suggested. Murphy said she made the decision independently amid a huge number of threats. I did, however, receive threats online, by phone, and by email directed at my safety, my family, my staff, and even my pets in an effort to coerce me into making this determination prematurely. Even in the face of thousands of threats, I always remain committed to upholding the law, read the letter. Trump praised Murphy for his steadfast dedication and loyalty to the country. I want to thank Emily Murphy at GSA for her steadfast dedication and loyalty to our country, the president wrote. She has been harassed, threatened, and abused, and I do not want to see this happen to her, her family, or employees of GSA. The president took to social media again late Monday, writing, "What does GSA being allowed to preliminarily work with the Dems have to do with continuing to pursue our various cases on what will go down as the most corrupt election in American political history? We are moving full speed ahead. We'll never concede to fake ballots and dominion." Johannes Abraham, Biden's transition executive director, said in a statement that Murphy has ascertained Vice President or President-elect Joe Biden and Vice President-elect Kamala Harris as the apparent winners of the election, providing the incoming administration with the resources and support necessary to carry out a smooth and peaceful transfer of power. Today's decision is a needed step to begin tackling the challenges facing our nation, including getting the pandemic under control and our economy back on track, he added. The GSA confirmed to the Epoch Times earlier on Monday that it would soon brief some members of Congress on the presidential transition. Allison Brigatti, a deputy administrator at the GSA, will spend 30 minutes on November 30th to brief House Oversight Chairwoman Carolyn Maloney, Democrat, New York, House Appropriations Chairwoman Nita Lowey, Democrat, New York, and two subcommittee chairmen, Representatives Joe Connolly, Democrat, Virginia, and Mike Quigley, Democrat, Illinois. The top Republicans on each committee and subcommittee will also be at the hearing. They are Representatives James Comer, James Comer, Republican, Kentucky, Kate Granger, Republican, Texas, Jody Hice, Republican, Georgia, and Steve Womack, Republican, Arkansas. The GSA is also expected to host on November 30th an in-person briefing for staff members on the Senate Appropriations Committee, the Senate Homeland Committee and Governmental Affairs Committee, and the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, a GSA spokesperson told the Epoch Times. Staffers for the House Appropriations and Oversight Committees are invited to the Senate staff briefing. The GSA, which oversees presidential transitions, has been thrown into the national spotlight after Biden declared victory in the 2020 election. Trump has alleged voter fraud and said any declarations of victory are premature. His campaign has mounted legal challenges over a variety of alleged voting irregularities in battleground states. Now, while a number of media outlets have declared Biden as president-elect, the Epoch Times won't declare a winner of the 2020 presidential election until all results are certified and any legal challenges are resolved. And that's the Epoch Times decision. Yesterday I had dropped a link in where I had shown a link to it on the Epoch Times site, and I dropped a link in the description below. This from Legal Insurrection: Biden to get transition funding. GSA Administrator Received Threats to herself, family, and pets, by William Jacobson. Emily Murphy says she received threats online by phone and by mail directed at my safety, my family, my staff, and even my pets in an effort to coerce me into making this determination prematurely. The General Services Administration has authorized public funding for the transition to Biden. Trump announced the move on Twitter. I want to thank Emily Murphy at GSA for her steadfast dedication and loyalty to our country. She's been harassed, threatened, and abused, and I do not want to see this happen to her, her family, or employees of GSA. Our case strongly continues, and we will keep up the good fight, and I believe we will prevail. Nevertheless, in the best interest of our country, I'm recommending that Emily and her team do what needs to be done with regard to initial protocols, and I've told my team to do the same. GSA Director or Administrator Emily Murphy issued a letter to the Biden campaign defending her delay while the electoral situation sorted itself out, but argued that now that votes were certified in key disputed states, the process could begin. In the letter, she noted that she received threats online, by phone, and by email directed at my safety, my family, my staff, and even my pets in an effort to coerce me into making this determination prematurely. More from the letter via Fox News. Please know that I came to my decision independently based on the law and available facts. Murphy said in a letter to Biden, I was never directly or indirectly pressured by any executive branch official, including those who work at the White House or GSA, with regard to the substance or timing of my decision. To be clear, I did not receive any direction to delay my determination. Murphy said her decision was based on recent developments involving legal challenges and certifications of election results. Earlier Monday, Michigan voted to certify its election results, and the Pennsylvania Supreme Court threw out a Trump campaign challenge that sought to invalidate thousands of absentee ballots in Allegheny County. There is a letter, and there's an embed of the entire letter. This tweet by a lefty journalist summed up the absurdity of the repeated media and Democrat assertions that Trump would refuse to leave office. This by Batya Ungar Sargon. I was specifically told that there would be a coup underway and he would never leave office. And civil war was imminent and democracy on its last legs. Now, I think that is so far from the truth. It's unbelievable, but you know, that's politics, I guess. And as I had mentioned earlier, and I'm going to repeat it once more to summarize what George Wendt from Cheers, he played Norm Peterson, always said, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and we're wearing milk-bone underwear. Now with that out of the way, I do have a little bit of a feel-good story. If there were any animal lovers out there, every year there's a Southwest Florida EagleCam up in my neck of the woods. This coming from the News Press. And it says, Norfolk Myers Eagles follow 2020's off-kilter field. Second nest build, eaglet left mate. Is Harriet the eagle going to lay an egg or two this week? Which nest will she and M15 use? A new one just built on the property or the one the world watches? Will their eaglet E15 return? These and other questions have been all over the Southwest Florida EagleCam website for the past week, as thousands from around the world watch the antics of the two Norfolk Myers bald eagles. Harriet and M15 have been fussing over the east pasture nests, with camera watchers catching them placing sticks, pumping up the bottom of the nest, and stopping for a meal. But there has also been activity at a second nesting site on the Dick Pritchett Real Estate property on Bayshore Road. where the eagles have been nesting for years. The addition of a second nest in a dead tree in the west pasture over the past months has some eagle watchers pondering if there's a possible switch-up for the pair. It's hard to tell. Debbie Guadagnino, a photographer and longtime eagle watcher from Cape Coral, said on Sunday they're placing grass and sticks. Sunday's mid-morning nest activity was at a minimum, with Harriet sitting on an upper branch by the original nest, called the attic, and a stealthy M15 dropping off a rabbit meal around 9 a.m. for his mate. M15 returned later to work on sticks along the nest wall. Earlier, the EagleCam website noted some eagle alerts. Both adults fly to the attic, alert vocals, owl or owls flying around the pasture. The cameras on the nest have allowed nearly 155 million people to view the eagles since 2012. Sunday morning, there were as many as 700 watching at times. In true 2020 fashion, it's been a unique season for the eagle pair. Dick Pritchett McSpadden, a member of the Pritchett family that owns the land where the eagles nest, said Sunday, having the second clutch in the spring has turned their typical 6-month nesting season into a full year for the pair. Adding the prolonged departure of E15, last seen on November 2nd, and the possible second nest location, the adult eagles really have had no nest or no rest in over a year. Pritchett McSpadden said site visitors have watched the eagle pair return to their normal routine of nest durations and mating in the original nest tree. And just this morning, they shared a rabbit brought in by M15 to the nest, she said. All positive signs towards using the main nest for egg laying. When that will be, only time will tell. This is uncharted territory for us and really amazing to watch firsthand on the live cams. As for that second nest, Pritchett McSpadden said a watch and wait attitude will continue. They have done small work on this same spot in years past, but nothing as extensive as seen these last few weeks, she said. Guadagnino, watching the nest Sunday with a 600mm camera lens off Bayshore, has been an eagle nest devotee since the cameras were installed. When I saw how close they were on the monitor, I came on down, she said of her initial visit. She's seen the activity at the new nest, one that was built over the past 5 weeks, she said. They spend a little time over there and a little time over here, but it's built, she said. But if she lays an egg in that nest with no camera access, we're out of luck. At times, Harriet and M15 have been seen in the new digs as well as primping around the old camera-surveilled site. Late last week, Harriet spent 2 nights at the original nest. Bob Henry of Buckingham was also out Wednesday watching the trials and tribulations of Harriet and M15. Henry takes photos of the eagles and produces calendars and photos and a gallery for people to buy or view at her own website. Henry, who has been watching the eagles for about 5 years, is glad the nest is so accessible. It's out in the open, there are places to park, she said. The eagles nest in a huge pasture off Bayshore next to the Church of the Nazarene. The church is very accommodating, Guadagnino said. Many of us make donations to the church to thank them. The eagles have been darlings in Southwest Florida for years. In 2019, the eagle pair got a jump on nesting season, and shortly before 5 p.m. on November 12, Harriet hunched over and out plopped a bright white egg. She laid a second one a few days later on November 16. Unfortunately, tragedy befell both. One egg never hatched, and the one that did, named E14 during its brief life, died the night of January 14 due to poisoning. However, a little more than a month later, the eaglet death, or a little more than a month after the eaglet death, the pair produced 2 more eggs 2 days apart. The new eaglets, named E15 and E16, successfully grew and fledged from the nest, although E15 hung around until the 1st of November, catching meals from the donning parents. E15, whose gender isn't proven, hasn't been seen since then. Henry believes E15 is a female. She's as mouthy as her mother, she laughed. And here are some eagle nest facts. The original adult bald eagle pair, known as Ozzie and Harriet, side note, named from the TV show Ozzie, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet, had been coming to this nest since 2006. After Ozzie's passing in the early fall of 2015, Harriet and M15 bonded in the late fall of 2015. This is their 5th season as a mated parent at this location. The nest sits 60 feet above the ground in a slash pine tree, In the spring of 2016, the nest deteriorated and then completely fell apart. The pair relocated the nest from across the street to its current location for the 2006-2007 nesting season. This nest is labeled LE026-B of the Florida State Monitoring Program. It has been monitored at this location for 8 years. Hatch history, 2012 season. There were over 60 million viewers watched adult eagles, Harriet and Ozzie, raised 2 eaglets from birth to fledge. This was the first year that the nest was streamed out to the world. Hope. And you can see that the egg was laid on November 26th, hatched New Year's Day, and fledged March 25th. Honor, egg laid November 2012, hatched January 3rd, fledged March 25th. Ozzie and Harriet returned to the nest in October 2013 and laid 2 eggs in November. E3 and E4, both. E3 died February 2nd. At 41 days old due to unknown causes, but E4 laid, hatched, and fledged. The 3rd year of the nest was streamed live in 2014. Ozzie and Harriet returned in November, laid 2 eggs in November. E5 and E6. E5 died January 20th. And due to unknown causes, and E6 was last seen May 4th, 2015. On March 17, 2015, here Ozzie was found dead by Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission officials and taken to the Clinic for Rehabilitation of Wildlife Incorporated for evaluation after showing signs of disorientation and injury. After 97 days of care to recover from a broken left clavicle and broken left corticoid bone, Ozzie was released back into the wild near the nest. On September 19, Ozzie made an appearance at the nest. On September 27, after being seen fighting with the male eagle in the area, Ozzie was found injured and again admitted back into Crow's care. On September 29, Ozzie died. 2015 season, a season of many firsts for Harriet and new mate M15, the Schiff Mill 2015. After Ozzie's passing, Harriet spent a few weeks courting possible new mates, but eventually bonded. Were mated with M15, laying 2 eggs. E7 and E8 both laid about 3 days apart, hatched 1 day apart. And E8 was last seen August 18. On February 9, E8 had to be cut free from the nest after getting monofilament to the shing line wrapped around its leg and foot, cutting off circulation and causing swelling. E8 was taken to Crow for treatment and released back to the nest 3 days later. The young eaglets continued to thrive and develop into juvenile eagles, but as the nest started to deteriorate, the eagles were attacked by an owl on May 7. E7 returned the next day. E8 did not and was feared dead. On May 13, nearly a week after the attack, volunteers found E8 alive in a nearby neighborhood with a broken leg. E8 was admitted to Crow for a second time for rehabilitation and recovery. After nearly 3 months at Crow, E8 was released back in the wild on August 18. 2016-2017 season marked the second season. Harriet and M15 mated as a pair. Season started with much anticipation if the eagles would return, as the nest had been completely lost. After the end of the last season, Harriet and M returned to the area in November, and the nest was in great shape for the laying of 2 eggs in November. E1, which was laid on November 22nd, was not viable and did not hatch. E9 fledged on March 4, 2017 at 7:22 a.m. Last seen May 2nd, now being the only eaglet in the nest. E9 thrived and grew on schedule, setting a record for the earliest fledge. 2017 season is the 3rd year for mated pair Harriet and M15, both returned in mid-August. Both eggs were laid in mid-November, hatched late November, fled about mid-March, last seen in May. E10 and E11 hatched just 19 hours apart. With just hours and not days between hatching, the siblings had a close bond and then developed at a similar pace. Never far apart, they spent hours learning to hunt, fight, and survive in the wild. 2018 season was the 4th year for the Harriet and M15 and the 7th year streaming this nest live. Both returned to the area in mid-August. Similar to the previous season, 2 eaglets were hatched and developed a close bond and at a similar pace. Never far apart, they spent hours learning to hunt, fight, and survive in the wild. And you can see that they were hatched roughly a day apart, fledged 2 days apart. E12 last seen in April, E13 in May. Last year, 2019 season started out positive but quickly soured. Harriet laid the earliest egg ever, November 12th, and then the second one on November 16. The second egg never hatched, and the first eaglet, named E14, died from poison, likely from an animal brought to the nest by his parents, and died January 14. Nature's drive to reproduce is strong enough, and the eagle couple laid 2 more eggs in February, and the new eaglets E15 and E16 successfully fledged. E16 in September and E15 on November 2nd. And that's the article. Now I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to the Southwest Florida EagleCam website and YouTube in the chat. But let's go right to it, to the page. You can see that, here, let me do a little reload here. You can see that there are 4 different multiple camera angles, and the last update was about 30 minutes ago. No one on the nest, 2:55 p.m. Turtles on drain rocks. Ahinga on co-fence, 4:10, adult to the treetop perch. 4:18, adult flies off. 4:12, both adults on the tail, or on the tall snag across the road southwest. Both fly to the summer pine inner branches at 4:23. And this is camera 1, which is right on the nest itself. Or no, check that. It's not on the nest itself. I don't know where. That's close to the nest, I believe. Let's go camera 2. Camera 2 is right across the street from I believe across the street from the nest. They even have a 360 cam, which is parked right on the nest itself, as you'll see right here, with a good view of the Bayshore Road. And there's a camera right at the pond, which I believe is across the street from the main camera. Now the sun's about to set, but yeah, it is beautiful. Let's go back to camera 1 for a couple of minutes. You can tell that it's 77 degrees and clear here in Southwest Florida. I think that was right on the, I'm not quite sure where in line that is, so we'll go to the Southwest Florida EagleCam itself, or rather the Southwest Florida EagleCam YouTube page, and it's not showing up. Or let me just hit the reload right quick and see what comes up here. And it's gonna take a short while for it to load up. But like I said, the link to that will be in the description below. So just check that out. And I will be updating the EagleCam as time goes on. You know, maybe give you firsthand experience or firsthand news of the eaglets' eggs being laid from hatching or from laying all the way up until fledging. But yeah, drop a comment below, telling me if you watch the EagleCam, and if you do, what you think of it, and I'll see you in the next video. With just 2 more Senate seats up for grabs, both of them in Georgia, both of them going to a runoff in early January. The Democrats are throwing a lot of money into the Georgia Senate runoff elections, and some of them might be a bit surprising. This comes from our good friends over at the Washington Free Beacon. Kiss of death, them losers throw money into Georgia state fire. 2 of the Democrat Party's biggest and most expensive losers in 2020 preparing to spend even more money on the upcoming Senate runoff elections in Georgia. Jaime Harrison, who raised a record-breaking $107 million for his campaign against Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican South Carolina, only to lose by more than 10 percentage points, has launched a political action committee that will support the Democrat Party's efforts to flip both Senate seats in Georgia. The Dirt Road PAC, as it is called, is just the latest outside spending group to take part in what promises to be one of the most expensive statewide elections in history. The announcement comes 2 weeks after field Senate candidate Amy McGrath launched Democrat Majority Action, a PAC that will also focus its efforts on Georgia. McGrath raised more than $88 million in his bid to unseat Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican Kentucky, who won re-election by almost 20 percentage points. The Democrat Party's performance in key 2020 Senate races constitutes perhaps the biggest waste of money in the history of American politics. In addition to Harrison's and McGrath's failed campaigns, unsuccessful efforts in Iowa, Maine, Montana, and North Carolina raised a combined $400 million. Of all the Democrat failures, only Cal Cunningham in North Carolina came within 6 percentage points of defeating the GOP incumbent. The Georgia runoff elections will feature one of the Democrat Party's most prolific human cash incinerators in John Ossoff, who previously raised a record-breaking $30 million in a failed run for Congress, where he couldn't even vote for himself because he didn't live there. Ossoff is attempting to unseat incumbent Senator David Perdue, Republican Georgia. Raphael Warnock, the other Democrat running for Senate in Georgia, is facing incumbent Senator Kelly Loeffler, Republican Georgia. The elections will take place on January 5th, just weeks before President-elect Joe Biden is scheduled to be inaugurated. Republicans currently control 50 seats in the Senate. Democrats control 48, but can still secure a narrow majority by winning both Georgia seats, given incoming Vice President Kamala Harris's ability to cast tie-breaking votes. Now, Democrats actually have 46 seats. However, there are 2 independents, one in Vermont, one in Maine, that align, well, not align, but they caucus with the Democrats, so that's why there's a 50 to 48. But yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what comes up January 5th, which is the first Tuesday in January. So be very interesting to find out what happens there. In other news, we have President Trump pardoning Michael Flynn. Got this from Axios yesterday, and by the way, there is breaking news on on it, which I will be speaking in a minute. But first, this coming from Axios.com from yesterday. Trump tells confidants that he plans to pardon Michael Flynn. President Trump has told confidants he plans to pardon his former national security advisor Michael Flynn, who pleaded guilty in December 2017 to lying to the FBI about his Russian contacts. Two sources with direct knowledge of the discussions tell Axios. Behind-the-scenes sources with direct knowledge of the discussions said Flynn will be part of a series of pardons that Trump issues between now and when he leaves office. The big picture, Flynn's pardon will be the culmination of a 4-year political and legal saga that began with the FBI's investigation into possible coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russian government in the 2016 election. The retired lieutenant general is viewed by many Trump supporters as a victim of political retaliation by the Obama administration. Flynn's lawyers and members of conservative media have accused the FBI of entrapping him and cited his case as part of a broader campaign to discredit the Russia probe. Earlier this year, Trump commuted the sentence of Roger Stone, another associate charged in the Mueller investigation who the president complained had been unfairly targeted in a political witch hunt. The backdrop, Flynn's legal troubles began during the 2016 presidential transition, when he urged former Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak in a phone call not to escalate in a response to the Obama administration imposing sanctions on Russia for election interference. Then Flynn lied about not discussing sanctions to Vice President Mike Pence, who repeated that denial to the media, causing alarm among Justice Democrat officials who fear the lies made Flynn susceptible to Russian blackmail. In January 2017, Flynn was interviewed without a lawyer present by FBI agents as part of a counterintelligence investigation into Russian interference. He later admitted to lying to the FBI as part of a plea deal with Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Flash forward, in January 2020, after 2 years of sentencing delays due to his cooperation with the Mueller investigation, Flynn and his new legal team sought to withdraw his guilty plea alleging prosecutorial misconduct. A federal prosecutor appointed to review the case by Attorney General Bill Barr recommended that the charges be dropped, finding that the FBI interview in which Flynn lied was conducted without any legitimate investigative basis. District Judge Emmett Sullivan did not immediately agree to drop the charges and asked for outside legal experts to weigh in on the unusual case. Flynn's lawyers filed an emergency appeal to force the judge to comply with the DOJ motion. That resulted in a protracted legal fight, which ended in August with an appeals court siding with Sullivan. Now, it's worth noting that Flynn's lawyer, Sidney Powell, acknowledged at a hearing in September that she had spoken to Trump recently and had requested that he not issue a pardon. It's unclear what discussions Powell and the president have had since then. Bottom line is Trump's pardon of Flynn would take the matter out of the hands of the court and of a Biden-controlled Justice Department. What to watch in his final weeks in office, Trump is approaching the time when past presidents have granted pardons, and he has the potential to expunge his friends and supporters of all federal criminal convictions on his way out the door. And that leads up to this breaking news from justthenews.com. Trump pardons former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn. President Trump on Wednesday pardoned his former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, bringing to end a tumultuous 4-year criminal case that felled the 3-star general before prosecutors reversed course and declared they had improperly pursued his case. Flynn, a retired Army lieutenant general, had pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about talking with the Russian diplomat during the 2016 Trump administration transition period. Attorney General William Barr earlier this year asked a federal court in Washington, D.C. to allow the Justice Department to drop the case. However, the matter has since been tied up in legal proceedings. Trump informed the general and his lawyer, Sidney Powell, of the decision Wednesday afternoon ahead of the Thanksgiving Day. In May, Barr recommended that U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan reverse the Flynn conviction and drop the criminal charges after Powell had discovered civil incidents of the FBI overstepping its authority in the Flynn matter and the larger Russia-Trump campaign collusion probe. Now, the recommendation came an hour after the lead prosecutor in the case withdrew. The federal prosecutor, Brandon Van Grack, was also part of Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team, who led the prosecution of Flynn. Van Grack resigned from the Flynn case without explanation. The government said recent revelations from evidence withheld from the court for years warranted the dramatic recommendation, including that the FBI interview in which Flynn was accused of lying was not warranted by law, after agents had already concluded that there was no criminal conduct or collusion with Russia by the retired general. The government has concluded that the interview of Mr. Flynn was untethered to and unjustified by the FBI's counterintelligence investigation into Mr. Flynn, and no longer justifiably predicated investigation that the FBI had, in the Bureau's own words, prepared to close because it had yielded an absence of any derogatory information. The government said the government is not persuaded that the January 24, 2017 interview was conducted with a legitimate investigative basis and therefore does not believe Mr. Flynn's statements were material, even if untrue. Moreover, we do not believe that the government can prove either the relevant false statements or the materiality beyond a reasonable doubt, the statement also reads. FBI analysts working on the Flynn-Russia investigation originally planned to end the inquiry in fall 2016 and eventually bought liability insurance, fearing they could be sued after their bosses continued to keep the investigation open based on quote-unquote conspiracy theories. Explosive new messages showed text messages discovered. We all went and purchased professional liability insurance when analysts texted on January 10, 2017, just 10 days before Trump took office. Holy crap, a colleague responded. All the analysts too? Powell, who took over the case after Flynn's 2017 guilty plea, aggressively challenged the government's conduct. He held the decision. This is an historic moment for the entire country and crucial to the restoration of the rule of law, she told Just the News. I tip my hat to the Attorney General and all the honest prosecutors and agents who sought to find the truth. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Now, Trump has said since essential the beginning of the case that Flynn had been treated unfairly. However, he is until Wednesday purportedly resisted from pardoning Flynn, instead waiting for him to be exonerated in the courts. Though Flynn had pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, he has sought to withdraw his plea after evidence emerged that his lawyer showed he was quote-unquote framed for committing no crime. Those revelations included that FBI agents who investigated Flynn's contacts with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak during the presidential transition in 2017 concluded January 4, 2017 to close the investigation because they found no derogatory evidence of a crime or counterintelligence threat. The agents were stopped from closing the case by then Special Agent Peter Strzok, who claimed in text messages that FBI leadership on the 7th floor had intervened. FBI officials began discussing arranging an interview with Flynn. In the absence of any evidence in wrongdoing, a senior FBI official, William Priestap, raised concerns about the strategy. Writing in handwritten notes a question about whether the FBI was playing games and looking to catch Flynn in a lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. Senior DOJ officials had told Mueller's team that they were concerned by the FBI conduct in investigating Flynn and believe the White House, or believe the Bureau's pretext for interview the White House advisor that he might have violated the Logan Act was a stretch. FBI agents discussed how they might avoid or slip in the required warning to Flynn during the interview that lying to the FBI could be prosecuted. That revelation also focused on then Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe's behavior, suggesting he pressed reluctant FBI officials to proceed with the Flynn interview, and then made the call himself to invite Flynn in hopes he would come solo without any lawyers or White House officials in tow. The prosecutors cited text messages suggesting McCabe was frustrated, quote unquote, by Priestap's concerns and quote unquote cut him off. During the call with Flynn, McCabe further advised that Mr. Flynn wished to have anyone, that if Mr. Flynn wished to have anyone else at the meeting, including the White House counsel, the FBI would have to elevate the issue to DOJ, the Justice Department motion stated. So that's a pretty huge thing, especially in the following, hopefully kicking off something major, but one never knows. There's this tweet by President Trump. It is my great honor to announce that General Michael T. Flynn has been granted a full pardon. Congratulations to General Flynn and his wonderful family. I know that you will now have a truly fantastic Thanksgiving. And yeah, so hopefully everything will come out, and who knows just what will happen with that. But and I mean, this is all a part of possible media interference as well, because I mean, after all, I mean, the media definitely may have something to do with it. And one thing that I had found, this coming from the Federalist, speaking of the media, is that there was a poll taken out, and 1 in 6 Biden voters would have changed their vote if they had known about scandals suppressed by the media. This by Jordan Davidson. A new report from the Media Research Center shows that the media's lack of coverage and big tech suppression of certain issues and scandals surrounding Democrat presidential nominee Joe Biden could have cost President Donald Trump the election. The survey results report that 17% of Biden voters would not have voted for the Biden-Harris presidential ticket if they had known about at least one of the 8 news stories that were suppressed by big tech and mainstream media outlets. This is not happenstance, this is not coincidence, this is not oversight, and this is not just a mistake. President and founder of Media Research Center, Ben Bazell, said at a press conference Tuesday, these were deliberate decisions that were made thousands of times, literally thousands of times, to either twist or to not cover it at all, which we found in this case. The survey, conducted online by the polling company with a plus or minus 2.34% margin of error, at a 95% confidence interval, asked 1,750 Biden voters living in 7 swing states, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, if they were aware of certain issues surrounding Biden, his family, and some of the Trump administration successes. Some of these topics include former Biden staffer Tara Reade and her sexual conduct sexual assault allegations against Biden, the Hunter Biden scandal, Vice President Kamala Harris's extreme liberal voting record in the Senate, the U.S.'s economic jump in the third quarter, millions of jobs added, America's energy independence, Operation Warp Speed successes, and Trump's facilitation of multiple peace deals in the Middle East. The media can talk all day long about Donald Trump and about things that he's doing wrong. It is absolutely unequivocal, the evidence, that it was the national news media that deliberately, and I underscore deliberately, made it a point not to tell the public about these stories that nobody can question. Were not important stories, Bazell said. We showed that they covered it up, and we're showing the evidence that it cost Donald Trump the election. Over a quarter of Biden voters said they didn't know Senator Harris had the most liberal voting record in the Senate in 2019, and nearly half of all Biden voters polled, 49%, said they were unaware of the U.S.'s remarkable economic recovery in the third quarter, doubling the previous record. 1 in 6 Biden voters polled, 17%, said they would have changed their vote had they been aware of these stories. The report also found that without even voting for Trump and simply refusing to vote for Biden, these voters would have handed all 6 of these states and a second term to the president if the news media had properly informed them about the 2 candidates. Each swing state surveyed also produced high numbers of Biden voters who would have defected if they had known the full story. In Pennsylvania and Georgia, 15% of Biden's voters would have refrained from casting a vote for him. In Michigan, it was 14%. In Arizona, it was 21%. Wisconsin, it was 13%. And in Nevada, it was 18%. The significant numbers, the report states, would have moved every one of the swing states into Trump's column, some by a huge margin. The president would have won the Electoral College 311 to 227, Bazell said. These results, Bazell said, shows a deliberate effort by big tech and the media to suppress information and must be combated. The national news media stole this election, Bazell concluded. As far as I'm concerned, they stole it from President Trump by deliberately censoring and keeping from the American people those stories which, had the American people known, would have led to his re-election unquestionably. And a little more on that from redstate.com. That says media suppression of this information helped steal the election. This from Nick Arama. As I reported earlier, Tucker Carlson did an epic rant last night about how media and big tech had basically stolen the election right in front of us for Joe Biden. Whatever else went on in the actual election itself, that's not just Carlson randomly speculating. There's data to back that up from 2 different surveys that show had media not been biased, sat on stories that were negative to Joe Biden and not reported/spun stories that were favorable to President Donald Trump, that a significant number of Biden voters would not have voted for him. This from the Washington Examiner. In one survey for MRC by McLaughlin and Associates, enough of Biden voters would have switched their selection had they known about his son Hunter's money scandal to give Trump a victory. In that poll, 4.6% of Biden's voters said they would not have selected him had they been aware of his son's China money affair. In the second, done by the polling company for MRC, 17% of voters would have shifted away from Biden had they known about Biden's scandals and Trump's achievements. Enough voters would have switched in Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to have given them to Trump without question, according to Ben Bazell. He would have won 311 electoral votes. To put it another way, and look at the final slide, and this is the number that is stunning. 17% of Biden voters would not have voted for Joe Biden had they been aware of at least one of those 8 stories. So just think about that for a second. Donald Trump would have won every single contested race in America. Of the 6 contested races, he would have won every single one. And you would have had at least 311 electoral votes, said Bazell. So it's not just a small thing and not a coincidence that when the Hunter Biden story hit, that Twitter forbade the URL from being shared and even suspended the New York Post account. If you read Red State, you're obviously up on a lot of what is happening, but still it's scary how ignorant of some of the facts these Biden voters were, who didn't know Biden had been accused of sexual assault, who didn't know about the Hunter Biden pay-for-play scandal, and who didn't know how far left Kamala Harris had been. The voters were also as ignorant of Trump's successes, no surprise perhaps given that the media failed to report on many of them or downplay them, including the huge job and economic growth under Trump, as well as the peace agreements he'd brokered, and how he made us energy independent for the first time. And yes, blame the media because if they're reporting honestly, then at least some of those things would get out there. Now, while the media criticized everything Trump did in regard to the coronavirus and spun everything he said to a negative, they didn't report prior to the election his successes in improving testing and cutting travel with China and Europe, which Biden wouldn't even agree was right until April 2nd, which saved countless lives and ultimately Operation Warp Speed, which helped to produce multiple vaccines in record time, which will likely save millions. From the Media Research Center, in Pennsylvania, 15% of Biden voters said they would have defected. Using the reported vote totals as of noon on November 19, this would have reduced his total by 518,204 votes, flipping the state to Trump. In Michigan, the percentage would have let Biden left was 14%, deducting 392,966 from his tally, flipping that state too. In Georgia, 15% of Biden's voters said they would have defected based on full information, taking 370,838 votes out of his column and putting Trump comfortably ahead. In Arizona, 21% say they would have changed their vote, deducting 351,150 from Biden's column and putting Trump in front there too. In Wisconsin, Biden would have lost 13% of his voters, taking away 211,987 from his column. In Nevada, the percentage of those who would have left Biden was 18%, or 126,627 voters. Such a shift would have put both of these states in Trump's column too. As MRC concluded, it wouldn't have been close had the media been honest, with 17% flipping and moving all the swing states into Trump's column, leaving Trump with 311. And I mean, it's just amazing what all this boils down to. And I mean, I just don't know what to make of it right at this moment, but I will definitely be looking into it, and also so bringing more news to you on this. Let me know in the comments what you think on this. But yeah, I'll be back with a new video soon. Yesterday, President Trump pardoned General Michael Flynn, and as predicted, the left is in an outrage and a tizzy over it. You know, some of them are wringing their hands like, oh, we did something bad, this, that, and everything else. But is it really? Let's see what is said on Front Page Magazine. Trump pardons Flynn by Lloyd Billingsley. The president puts an end to the relentless partisan pursuit of an innocent man. It is my great honor to announce that General Michael T. Flynn has been granted a full pardon, President Trump tweeted Wednesday. I know you will now have a truly fantastic Thanksgiving. According to a White House statement, the pardon ends the relentless partisan pursuit of an innocent man, and Flynn should never have been punished. The retired general, who formerly headed the Defense Intelligence Agency, was Trump's choice for National Security Advisor. Flynn was a hardliner against Islamic terrorism and an open critic of First Lady and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. True to form, Flynn fell afoul of the previous administration. Now, according to revelations from outgoing DNI Richard Grinnell, UN Ambassador Samantha Power made unmasking requests for Flynn on November 30th, 2016, and then on December 2nd, 17th, and 14th, and again on January 11th, 2017, days before Trump took office. On December 14 and 15 of 2016, CIA boss John Brennan made unmasking requests for General Flynn. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper put in requests on December 12th, 28th, and again on January 7th, 2017. FBI Director James Comey requested to unmask General Flynn on December 15, 2016, and again on January 12, 2017. Also on January 12, 2017, Vice President Joe Biden made his request to unmask the general. As these requests confirmed, General Flynn had become a primary target of the Crossfire Hurricane and Crossfire Razor operations against President Trump. As the Democrat deep state media access contended, Russian intervention had put Trump in the White House. That conspiracy theory does not emerge in transcripts of the 2016 Flynn-Kislyak calls, and as they confirmed, Flynn was simply doing his job. FBI boss James Comey, who had declined to recommend prosecution of Hillary Clinton in 2016, sent FBI agents to entrap Flynn. What's our goal, said one agent's notes. Truth admission, or get him to lie so we can prosecute him or get him fired. Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI, and his case landed with Judge Emmett Sullivan. Revelations of deep state misconduct continued to emerge, and in May of 2020, the Department of Justice dropped the case against Flynn after a considered review of all the facts and circumstances of this case, including newly discovered and disclosed information. Judge Sullivan opposed the dismissal and appointed former federal judge John Gleeson to argue for Flynn's continued prosecution. Gleeson threatened to have Flynn prosecuted for criminal contempt on the theory that, if he was now claiming innocence, he must have committed perjury when he pled guilty. Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, appeared, and in June, a three-judge panel agreed with Flynn. In September, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit rejected General Michael Flynn's petition for dismissal and voted 8-2 to send the case back to Judge Emmett Sullivan. That month, Flynn's attorneys filed documents with the court showing that FBI agents knew the case was bogus. As one wrote, "If this thing ever gets FOIA'd, there are going to be some tough questions asked." There was no case against General Flynn, his attorneys concluded. There was no crime. The FBI and the prosecutors knew that. This American hero and his entire family have suffered for 4 years from public abuse, slander, libel, and all means of defamation at the hands of the very government he pledged his life to defend. For those reasons and all those previously briefed, the government's motion to dismiss should now be granted with prejudice. It wasn't. Judge Sullivan was not disqualified and did not recuse himself. Sullivan duly pushed the case past the November deadline, or past the November election, rather, but before the judge could issue a ruling, President Trump granted Flynn a full pardon. Democrats responded in predictable style, still smoldering over from the failed Russia hoax, long after Special Counsel Robert Mueller found no collusion. Trump has once again abused the pardon power to reward Michael Flynn, who chose loyalty to Trump over loyalty to his country, said Adam Schiff in a statement. For Jerry Nadler, the pardon was undeserved, unprincipled, and one more stain on President Trump's rapidly diminishing legacy, and so on. At this writing, nothing on the pardon has appeared from Joe Biden, who unmasked General Flynn and suggested using the 1799 Logan Act to keep open the investigation of the general. That recalls the larger backstory still in play. The previous president deployed the upper reaches of the FBI, DOJ, and intelligence community to exonerate his chosen successor, Hillary Clinton, and attack candidate and President Trump. The ensuing Russia hoax, Ukraine hoax, and impeachment bid were part of a coup against President Trump. None of the major players have been prosecuted, and James Comey and Peter Strzok have written self-serving books. For their part, Democrats are acting as though the charges of Russian collusion were true. Witness Adam Schiff's charge that the foreign entanglements of Hunter Biden were part of a Russian disinformation campaign. It'll be interesting to see what the newly pardoned General Flynn has to say about the Democrats' bid to take down a duly elected president of the United States. And that is so very true there. And got this from the Gateway Pundit. Democrats led by Adam Schiff have meltdown over Flynn pardon. Democrats led by Representative Adam Schiff of California erupted in anger Wednesday afternoon after President Trump pardoned his former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, U.S. Army retired, bringing to an end Flynn's nearly 4-year-long ordeal of being targeted and prosecuted by the Obama-led deep state for a crime he did not commit. Schiff's statement: Donald Trump has repeatedly abused the pardon power to reward friends and protect those who covered up for him. This time he pardons Michael Flynn, who lied to hide his feelings with the Russians. It's no surprise that Trump would go out as he came in, cricket to the end. And that coming from a tweet. Representative Ted Lieu of California tweeted out, Michael Flynn committed a felony, but since he is a friend of Donald Trump, he gets special treatment no ordinary person gets, like a pardon. This is the kind of behavior that caused voters to fire protests because Trump repeatedly put himself and his elite friends over America. And Representative Gerald Nadler, Democrat, New York. This pardon is undeserved, unprincipled, and one more stain on President Trump's rapidly diminishing legacy. Representative Don Breyer, Democrat, Virginia, tweeted out, pardoning Mike Flynn, who lied to the FBI and pled guilty, is an act of extreme corruption. That we expect such underhanded behavior from Donald Trump, the most corrupt president in our history, makes it no less wrong. Donald Trump is crooked. Senator Ed Markey of Massachusetts tweeted out, Michael Flynn is a criminal, Roger Stone is a criminal, Donald Trump is a criminal. None of them deserve to be pardoned. Don't know all that much about Roger Stone. However, you know, from what I had seen, General Flynn is no criminal, but we do know this much for sure. Trump did provide a happy Thanksgiving for Michael Flynn. This from Liberty Nation. An American political matter is pardoned, much to the outrage of some prominent Democrats. It may take years to unravel the political persecution and prosecution of Michael Flynn. President Trump officially pardoned his former national security advisor November 25, igniting fury and indignation in the legacy media and the Democrat Party lawmakers. Why would the president take such a step at this time? Perhaps because he wholeheartedly believes it is the right and decent thing to do, as do many others. A national disgrace. For countless Americans, the thin gruel used to prosecute Michael Flynn amounted to nothing less than a national disgrace. A legal saga drawn on for almost 4 years. Flynn's sad tale is a case of guilty until proven innocent. The former three-star lieutenant general with a long history of service to the United States was boxed into a legal corner, ultimately agreeing to plead guilty to lying to the FBI about his conversation with a Russian official before Trump took office. He later withdrew that plea. Eventually, the Justice Department decided to drop the charges against Flynn. In defending the Justice Department's decision, Attorney General Bill Barr said that Mr. Flynn did not commit a crime and that people sometimes plead to things that turn out not to be crimes. It must be acknowledged that the person at the forefront of the Flynn case's successful adjudication is none other than attorney Sidney Powell. Before Mr. Trump took office, Flynn's phone call with Russian official Sergei Kislyak was wiretapped while the FBI was investigating alleged Russian involvement in the 2016 election. Flynn was caught up in the probe, which was later called a quote-unquote perjury trap by the Attorney General. Recognizing the injustice done to Flynn, Barr told CBS's Catherine Herridge, "I also think it's sad that nowadays these partisan feelings are so strong that people have lost any sense of justice, and the groups that usually worry about civil liberties and making sure that there is proper procedures followed and standards seem to be ignoring it and willing to destroy people's lives and see great injustices done." Stripped of his exceptional reputation and shelling out exorbitant amounts of money in legal fees, there is no question that Flynn suffered mightily from the politically charged accusations of wrongdoing. Even after the Justice Department dropped the case, Judge Emmett G. Sullivan carried on and appointed former Judge John Gleeson to oppose the Justice Department's decision to drop the charges against Flynn. Gleeson's involvement was widely regarded as an extraordinary move in a case with acute political overtones, and that was written in the New York Times. Questions regarding Flynn's guilt or innocence have long been split along party lines. Thus, it came as no surprise those on the left wasted no time in decrying the retired Lieutenant General's pardon. And we see that Adam Schiff's comment, he was predicted to be among the first to cry foul. Schiff told anyone who would listen that Flynn chose loyalty to Trump over loyalty to his country, and that's why Trump had pardoned him. The problem for Schiff and his comments at this point is that his sound and fury signify nothing. The Michael Flynn saga is exhibit A of what can happen when one associates with someone dedicated to quote-unquote draining the swamp. Unfortunately for Flynn, he found out how dark and deep the swamp is in Washington, D.C. However, if the one doing the draining holds back the pardon of holds the pardon of the pardon, justice ultimately will prevail. And that from Liberty Nation, and that is a wonderful way to start Thanksgiving. And yes, today is Thanksgiving, so I would like to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. And there's a little bit of history from the American thinker on Thanksgiving, which is entitled Thanksgiving and the Mayflower. Thanksgiving Day parades have been largely canceled in 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic, but balloons and floats are symbolically celebrating the harvest and other blessings of the past year. American Thanksgiving is modeled on the three-day harvest feast shared by pilgrims who had landed in the New World in 1620 and the Wampanoag, a tribe of American Indians, in November 1621. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, and cranberry sauce did not seem to be on the menu, but rather deer and seafood. Turkey became the meal of choice in the mid-1850s, especially after President Abraham Lincoln declared Thanksgiving a national holiday in 1863. It was celebrated and eaten since then, except when President F.D. Roosevelt changed the day for a short time. On the fourth Thursday of November, a day on which Americans eat more than on any other day of the year. Thanksgiving is therefore linked historically with the original Pilgrims seeking religious freedom in the New World, and is connected with the origin of American society. There are only 10 million there are perhaps only 10 million Americans who today can trace their ancestry back to them. They number Humphrey Bogart and Presidents John Adams and James Garfield. More than half of the original settlers died during the first winter as a result of poor nutrition and housing. The rest were helped by Squanto, an English-speaking Indian, a member of the Pawtuxet tribe, who taught them to plant corn and rent a fish and hunt beaver. He was therefore the mediator between the Pilgrims and the Indians and was therefore responsible for the Harvest Festival. Things have changed since the Pilgrims got a shock when they landed on Plymouth Rock. So have the meaning and significance of that landing 400 years ago, and its consequences for the birth of the American nation. On November 21, 1620, the Mayflower, a three-masted ship that had sailed from England on September 16, 2020, after a voyage of 65 days, arrived at Cape Cod, Provincetown Harbor. It contained 102 passengers and 30 crewmen. Of the 50 men on board, 41 were quote-unquote separatists, true pilgrims, the group who wanted to leave the established church and engage in secret worship. People who had left England to live in Leiden, in the Dutch Republic, and a wealthy maritime power, and a more religiously diverse and tolerant place in England. In 1608, this group, in revolt against the established church, decided to go to Virginia and set up their own colony. The rest of the passengers on the Mayflower were quote-unquote strangers, who were selected by merchant adventurers, a joint stock company of financial backers for colonial expeditions who funded the Mayflower. The passengers included indentured workers, but no slaves. Now the Mayflower had intended to lay anchor in North Virginia, since the Pilgrims had signed a contract with the Virginia Company, a trading company to colonize parts of the east coast of the New World. They had intended to settle on land near the Hudson River in North Virginia. The Pilgrims did not have an official patent to settle in New England, and therefore, on November 21, 1620, while on board the ship, they signed before landing in and inhabiting Pawtuxet, Plymouth, which was known as the Mayflower Compact. The original document has been lost, but copies of notes have survived with information of the text and the individuals who signed, one of whom is sometimes remembered today, Miles Standish, a military officer hired by the Pilgrims as a military leader, and a man who later enforced the new laws and protected the colonists. The Mayflower Compact is a short document signed by 41 passengers, written by loyal subjects of our great sovereign Lord King James. They had undertaken to plant the first colony in the northern parts of Virginia for the glory of God, the advancement of the Christian faith, and the honor of king and country. What is crucially important is that they agreed on a covenant, a civic body politic, which would enact, constitute, and frame just and equal laws, ordinances, and offices for the general good of the colony. To this, they promised all due submission and obedience. The brief compact can be seen as a mini-constitution, a statement of unity, the first governing document of the New World, a model of self-government, a covenant derived from the consent of the governed. The self-government lasted 70 years until 1691, when the Plymouth colony became part of the Massachusetts Bay Colony. More settlers arrived, thereby leading to an early form of representative government, a general court, a holdover from the Bay Colony, to which each town elected representatives to attend. The Mayflower Compact was a covenant, a religious concept that echoes politically with its emphasis on unity, consent of the people, and just and equal laws. It was significant that the Pilgrims, not British officials in London, chose their own governor, John Carver. John Quincy Adams declared the agreement the original American Social Compact. As a result of current protests against racism and colonialism, not everyone accepts this view. The argument is made by some who see the compact as a systematic of colonialism, not of liberty. The most extreme challenge has been, in the New York Times, the formulation of the 1619 Project. The assertion that 1619 was a true birth year of the American nation, not 1776, the normally accepted year. The reason given is the fact that in August 1619, A ship carrying 20 or more slaves from the area now known as Angola was captured by pirates. It landed at Point Comfort in Virginia, where the pirates sold the slaves to Jamestown colonists. Critics have argued that this was the beginning of slavery in America and that these slaves can be considered founding fathers, quote unquote, as they see slavery, or since they see slavery as the basis of American economic growth. In this view, slavery and its consequences are put in the center of the American story. Now, the 1619 Project is essentially political propaganda, not history. This is not to disparage the pain of Black experience or deny the reality of slavery and segregation, but to argue, as the project does, that the 1619 incident is more important for America than 1776 or 1787 suggests a lack of moral compass. It should not deprive anyone of his turkey. Thanksgiving Day parades have largely been, and that is the end of the article. But yeah, I mean, you know, I would like to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving and Black Friday tomorrow, but in everything, you know, let's give thanks to God and, you know, just remember why we have Thanksgiving, and it's basically, you know, giving thanks for what we have, you know, whether it's material, you know, spiritual or otherwise. So this Thanksgiving, really give thanks to the one who allows us to give thanks, and that is God. Many people say that President-elect Joe Biden is going to have a return to normalcy. Well, for those who say that, it means a return to the Council on Foreign Relations and Bilderberg. This coming from zerohedge.com. Joe Biden, return of the CFR is the title. The Joe Biden presidency means a return to normality simply because it means a return to the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations, or CFR. In 2008, Barack Obama received the names of his entire future cabinet already 1 month prior to his election by CFR's senior fellow and Citigroup banker Michael Flynn, as a WikiLeaks email later revealed. Consequently, the key posts in Obama's cabinet were filled almost exclusively by CFR members, as was the case in most cabinets since World War II. To be sure, Obama's 2008 Republican opponent, the late John McCain, was a CFR member too. Michael Flynn later negotiated the TPP and TTIP international trade agreements before returning to the CFR as a distinguished fellow. In 2017, CFR nightmare President Donald Trump immediately canceled these trade agreements because he viewed them as detrimental to U.S. domestic industry, which allowed China to conclude its own recently announced RCEP free trade area encompassing 14 countries and a third of global trade. Trump also canceled other CFR achievements like the multinational Iran nuclear deal and the UN climate and migration agreements, and he tried but largely failed to withdraw U.S. troops from East Asia, Central Asia, the Mideast, Europe, and Africa, thus seriously endangering the global U.S. empire built over decades by the CFR and its 5,000 elite members. Unsurprisingly, most of the U.S. media, whose owners and editors are themselves members of the CFR, did not like President Trump. This was also true of most of the European media, whose owners and editors are members of international CFR affiliates like the Bilderberg Group and the Trilateral Commission, founded by CFR directors after the conquest of Europe during World War II. Moreover, it was none other than the CFR which in 1996 advocated a closer cooperation between the CIA and the media. That is a restart of the famous CIA Operation Mockingbird. Historically, OSS and CIA directors since William Donovan and Alan Dulles have always been CFR members. Joe Biden promised that he would form the most diverse cabinet in U.S. history, quote unquote. Now, this may be true in terms of skin color and gender, but almost all of his key future cabinet members have one thing in common. They are indeed members of the U.S. Council on Foreign Relations. This is the case for Anthony Blinken, State, Alejandro Mayorkas, Homeland Security, Janet Yellen, Treasury, Michelle Flournoy and Jay Johnson, candidates for defense, Linda Thomas Greenfield, Ambassador to the UN, Richard Stengel, U.S. Agency for Global Media. Stengel famously called propaganda, quote unquote, a good thing at a 2018 CFR session. John Kerry, Special Envoy for Climate. Nelson Graham, candidate for trade. And Thomas Donilon, candidate for CIA Director. Jake Sullivan, Biden's national security advisor, is not yet a CFR member, but Sullivan has been a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for World Peace, a think tank promoting active international engagement by the United States, and a member of the U.S.-German Marshall Fund's Alliance for Securing Democracy, a major promoter of the Russiagate, quote-unquote, disinformation campaign to restrain the Trump presidency, both of which are run by senior CFR members. Most of Biden's CFR-vetted nominees supported recent U.S. wars against Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and Yemen, as well as the 2014 regime change in Ukraine. Unsurprisingly, neoconservative Max Boot, the CFR Senior Fellow in National Security Studies and one of the most vocal opponents of the Trump administration, has called Biden's future cabinet America's A-Team. Thus, after 4 years of populism and isolationism, a Biden presidency would mean the return of the Council on Foreign Relations and the continuation of the continuation of a tradition of more than 70 years. Indeed, the CFR was founded in 1921 in response to the trauma of 1920, when U.S. President Warren Harding in the U.S. Senate turned isolationist and renounced U.S. global leadership after World War I. In 2016, Donald Trump's America First campaign reactivated this 100-year-old foreign policy trauma. Was the 2020 presidential election stolen, as some allege? While there are certainly indications of significant statistical anomalies in key Democrat-won swing states, whether these were decisive for the election outcome may be up to courts to decide. At any rate, Joe Biden may well be the first U.S. president known to be involved in international corruption, even before entering office. Why are most U.S. and international media hardly interested in this? Well, why should they? And there are two photos there. One is the American Empire and its media. The other is the Council on Foreign Relations, the Imperial Council of the United States. There are a lot of interesting links in the article as well. I highly recommend you check them out. And yeah, I mean, it's interesting how intertwined and also how, well, deep the swamp is. And no matter how deep the swamp is, there is one thing that we are thankful for, or at least I'm thankful for, this coming from conventionofstates.com. Yes, I am a member of the Convention of States Project, which uses Article 5 of the Constitution. I'll get into that in a future video, but here's the article. This Thanksgiving, be thankful that the founders gave us a way to drain Biden administration swamp. Joe Biden announced his cabinet plans this week, and it looks like he plans to put the swamp back in charge at the White House. Biden is filling his cabinet with career politicians, lifelong bureaucrats, and former members of the Obama administration. People like John Kerry, Obama's Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen, and longtime advisor Anthony Blinken are promising to return D.C. to quote-unquote normal. As the American people know, this just means they'll continue pursuing corruption, abuse, and overreach. When President Trump promised to drain the swamp, many Americans cheered his efforts to cut back on regulation and shrink the size of federal bureaucracies. But while he did his best, the changes he imposed were impermanent. Biden's cabinet members will reverse many of President Trump's reforms, and D.C. will continue to be as swampy as ever. We need a better solution, and this Thanksgiving we should be thankful that the founders gave us that solution in Article 5. In Article 5, Convention of States can propose constitutional amendments that don't change with each administration. These amendments can force Congress to balance the budget, get rid of career politicians with a term limits mandate, and truly drain the swamp by permanently limiting the size, scope, and jurisdiction of the federal government. If you're afraid of the changes the Biden administration will bring, well, there is hope. The people in the states can join together, call a convention of states, and make the structural changes to DC that no president can undo. And to join the convention of states team in your state, sign the petition below. And so far there are 1.7 million signatures on the petition. And almost everyone knows that our federal government is on a dangerous course. The unsustainable debt combined with crushing regulations on states and businesses is a recipe for disaster. By the way, this is the petition. What is less known is that the founders gave state legislatures the power to act as a final check on abuses of power by Washington, D.C. Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution authorizes the state legislatures to call a convention for proposing needed amendments to the Constitution. This process does not require the consent of the federal government in Washington, D.C. I support the Convention of States project, the national effort to call a convention under Article 5 of the U.S. Constitution, restricted to proposing amendments that will impose fiscal limits on the federal government, limit its power and jurisdiction, and impose term limits on its officials and members of Congress. I want our state to be one of the necessary 34 states to pass a resolution calling for this kind of Article 5 convention. You can find a copy of the model resolution and the Article 5 pocket guide here, which explains the process and answers many questions here, and there's a link to it. I ask that you support the Convention of States project and consider becoming a co-sponsor of the resolution. Please respond to my request by informing the National COS team of your position or sending them any questions you have. There's an email and the phone number. Thank you so much for your service to the people of our district, respectfully, and your name. But yeah, that is basically the only way. And it limits, or the convention is limited to 3 topics, not amendments, but topics, to which many amendments can come out of. One is limiting the size of, or limiting the fiscal restraints. Balanced budget could come out of there. Limiting the size and jurisdiction of the federal government. Eliminating eliminating the Department of Education, or some of the lower departments, definitely needed. And limiting the size and limiting the terms of DC officials and members of Congress, basically term limits. So that is why, and I'll be getting into more on that in future videos, but so stay tuned for that. And that's just one of many things that the election will come down to. Got this from the American Thinker. What the election will come down to. We need to begin with what most people almost surely know, despite the predictable disclaimers and pro forma expressions of doubt emerging all over the infoscape, namely the 2020 election is in the process of being stolen in what amounts to an insidiously deceptive coup d'etat. It is fair to assume that this is common knowledge. The circumstantial evidence is dispositive. Biden was rarely able to manage a rally of more than a dozen or two stalwarts, while Trump's rallies could top 50,000. Biden garnered more votes than even Obama did, a sublime unlikelihood. The media called for Biden when Trump was comfortably ahead in the ballot count. A sudden and nigh miraculous manner drop of late arriving ballots in the wee hours tilted the scale for Biden. The virtual expulsion of the virtual expulsion of Republican scrutineers at the voting booths, and the obstruction by state authorities of monitored recounts, and the use of Dominion voting systems allegedly calibrated to favor Biden and erase Trump. Veteran lawyer Robert Kirk is convinced that the facts are the kind and quality of substantial evidence which, if presented to a jury, could easily result in a unanimous verdict by all 12 jurors, beyond a reasonable doubt that the re-election of Donald J. Trump was stolen through the use of the Dominion voting software systems installed in states throughout our country. The so-called system glitches privileging Biden turnout to constitute an unmistakable pattern, a veritable constellation of effects. Moreover, the contest is far from over and the Kraken is yet to be released. Reviewing the reams of evidence available today, Joe Hofda, where Gateway Pundit rehearses the obvious. Within the first 24 hours after the election, we knew it was stolen. President Trump sets the record for the most votes ever. And somehow the guy in the basement who was quickly failing in intellectual abilities somehow broke the all-time vote record to beat the president's win. Naturally, much has been made of the media's hyped imbroglio between lawyer Sidney Powell and the president. While the fissure is obviously troubling, adverse or gloating commentary sits in the realm of pure speculation. For all we know, the breach between the two legal teams may argue a strategy to damp down criticism of Powell as quote-unquote unhinged, reflecting poorly on Trump, or perhaps to prepare for a pincer movement and deposing evidence before adjudicating bodies. Time will tell. Additionally, as Andrea Whitberg points out, Trump's approval of U.S. General Services Administrator Emily Murphy's decision to make resources available to the Biden transition team does not imply surrender, but a signal that he is not some madman determined to stay hunkered down at the White House. Rather, it is a wise tactical move, taking the wind out of the sails of every person who asserts that he is acting as an innocent tyrant. It's the Obamas of this world, not the Trumps, who make their successors' transition a nightmare. Now, when all is said and done, the outcome of an irremediably tainted election will come down to two critical factors: the Supreme Court and the military. If Trump does not have the military behind him, then his disadvantage will likely be terminal. There can then be no question of invoking the Insurrection Act should it become necessary, or that illicit arrests on the grounds of treason can even be contemplated. And if the Supreme Court refuses to hear the case or agrees to consider it but concludes that there is not sufficient evidence to validate Trump's deposition, the election will be over. Trump will have lost, and America will head down the road to the installation of a totalitarian socialist regime, what Trump promised he will never allow. It'll make no difference whether Biden packs the courts or not, for it will already have semaphored its weakness, its inherent lack of judicial integrity, and its ultimately quixotic nature. Republican and Democrat alike would know that fraud so massive that it is practically incalculable has been demonstrably occurred, and that no one in authority, including the Supreme Court, would want to confront a political cataclysm and ignite the wrath and violence of a ruthlessly aggressive and homicidal left. The argument would be that civil unrest must be avoided at all costs, and that it is preferable to turn a blind eye to electoral theft rather than to preside over the fracturing of the nation and the abrogation of the civil contract. The argument, of course, would be disingenuous, self-serving, and cowardly, the ultimate sophistry. For the nation is already fractured, the civil contract has effectively ceased to exist, and the corruption has gone so deep that if it's not met head-on and scoured clean, there would be no nation remaining whose civil character could be assumed to exist. The electoral malady would have been fatal, but the fair lady has not yet begun to warble. There has been some encouraging news just breaking. The Supreme Court has announced that 3 conservative justices, Amy Barrett, Brett Kavanaugh, and Samuel Alito, have been assigned to oversee circuit court cases in swing states. The court has now become profoundly involved. What this may augur for the future is another matter. I have met people who agree that the election has indeed been stolen and approve of the theft. Anything to get Trump out of the White House is legitimate. In their books, vice is a higher virtue, the ends justify the means, and is statistically improbable Predetermined result is to be applauded irrespective of how it may violate conscience and ethical principle, a sentiment shared by millions, which does not make it any less immoral. A lie is a lie and the truth is the truth, no matter how we scumble the picture. As noted, any reasonable person suspects, almost with practical certainty, that a gargantuan electoral swindle is happening before their very eyes, and the same is surely true of committed Democrats. Honor among thieves may be the greatest dishonor imaginable. They don't care. The arc of injustice bends toward a desired conclusion. And based on what I've read and seen, that is plausible and possibly true. You know, I mean, there could be a lot coming out between now and December 8th, when the states have to certify their electoral votes. January 14th, or December 14th, when the Electoral College meets, and January 6th, when Congress meets to certify the votes. So anything can and will happen, but one never knows. However, most things are already happening, and that is what most outgoing presidents do, and that is releasing a list of pardons or commutations between now and January 20th. President Trump had already started with General Flynn a couple days ago, and there's this from BizPac Review, where Tulsi Gabbard proposes a short list of potential Trump pardons. Of the most predictable actions expected from President Donald Trump following the controversial 2020 election, his Thanksgiving Eve pardon of former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn was at the top of the list. Flynn found himself caught up in the Democrats' nefarious game of targeting Trump, which started before he was ever elected to office and continued after he won in 2016, effectively being set up by the FBI under disgraced former Director James Comey. But the mistreatment didn't stop there, as a rogue activist judge tried to maneuver around the Justice Department's eventual decision to drop charges against Flynn. As for this, Representative Tulsi Gabbard, Democrat Hawaii, offered a short list of other names Trump should take under consideration for pardons, more specifically Julian Assange and Edward Snowden, brave whistleblowers exposing lies and illegal actions in our government must be protected. Gabbard tweeted out, "Join me and urge Congress pass my bipartisan legislation, HRES 1162, HRES 1175, HR 8452, calling for charges against Snowden and Assange to be dropped and to reform the Espionage Act. Since you're giving pardons to people, please consider pardoning those who, at great personal sacrifice, expose the deception and criminality of those in the deep state," the outgoing lawmaker tweeted. Gabbard offers the list while linking to a video she posted in early October calling for support of legislation she was proposing that would protect whistleblowers, reform the Espionage Act, and drop charges against Assange and Snowden. Now, Assange is in prison in the United Kingdom, and Snowden has been living in exile in Russia since 2013. In an interview this week with Glenn Greenwald, Snowden warned that the war on whistleblowers, which he said started under former President George W. Bush, had escalated under former President Barack Obama and continued under Trump. He also said it should continue under a potential Biden administration. "This is not a partisan issue. These people are backers of Obama," Snowden said. "And we know about the things that have happened under the Trump administration. But when you look at this as a trend, as a dynamic, what you see is a criminalization of journalism." Snowden referenced Assange, saying WikiLeaks was the greatest act of journalism he ever did. There's plenty of speculation over who else Trump may pardon, to include possibly himself. After all, in July, he commuted the prison sentence of Roger Stone. Former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort, who is serving a 7-year-plus sentence on various federal bank and tax fraud charges, is seen as a possibility, as is George Papadopoulos, who serves as a Trump campaign foreign policy advisor. "It was never discussed, but I wouldn't take it off the table," Trump said at the time of a potential Manafort pardon. Why would I take it off the table? These figures were swept up in former Special Counsel Robert Mueller's investigation into the hoax known as Russian collusion. Now, while the president has not been charged with any crimes, he has suggested that he has a right to pardon himself, as seen in a tweet on January 4, 2018. As has been stated by numerous legal scholars, I have the absolute right to pardon myself, but why would I do that when I have done nothing wrong? In the meantime, the never-ending witch hunt, led by 13 very angry and conflicted Democrats and others, continues into the midterms. Now, given that the Radical Democrat Party effectively attempted a silent coup with the Russian collusion probe, following that failed effort with a sham impeachment, this cabal has already proven that they don't need an actual crime to come after Trump. The far-left faction of the party, consumed with hatred of Trump, is not talking about going after the president and his family if Biden is installed as the next president. Trump is already facing a criminal probe of his business activities by Manhattan Attorney General Cyrus Vance and a civil litigation by New York State Attorney General Letitia James, both of which draw on daughter Ivanka Trump. Aside from the president's Supreme Court picks, a self-pardon may very well be the smartest thing he could do because they are coming should his legal challenge to the election outcome fall apart. And that from BizPack Review. So the next couple months is going to be very, very intriguing, both with the aforementioned legal battles, those with the election, and who the president will pardon and whatnot. So leave a comment below what you think will happen over the next couple months, and also I would like your questions, comments, or concerns about Article 5 in the Convention of States project, and I'll try and answer them in a separate video, and I'll see you in the next video. And that's going to do it for the news for this week. I am Mick Bulow. Again, if you like what you watch, please go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. Also subscribe, and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell an enemy or two even. And I will be back next week. Until next time, peace.